marriage and divorce, and wills and death. So from those 36, we will only be covering those paragraphs of the Aqdas that talks about those subjects. Of course, they're all 4 areas require probably a period of questions and answers among ourselves. So if there's something that isn't clear in our reading, please make a note and we'll try to discuss it. Because as I said in session 1, Baha'u'llah was asked a lot of questions about the Aqdas on the material, physical side. Money, marriage, children. These are the things that the believers in his day were interested in. And unfortunately, right now, we're not the new creation. So our national offices are working with questions from their membership all over the world. You'll see this when I bring up some of the letters from the Universal House of Justice. So let's begin with marriage, and we'll have Dennis read paragraph 63.
God hath prescribed matrimony unto you. Beware that ye take not unto yourselves more wives than 2. Whoso counteth himself with a single partner from among the maidservants of God, both he and she shall live in tranquility. And he who would take unto his service a maid may do so with propriety. Such is the ordinance which in truth and justice hath been recorded by the pen of revelation. Enter into wedlock, O people, that ye may bring forth one who will make mention of me amid my servants. This is my bidding unto you. Hold fast to it as an assistance to yourselves.
We'll be explaining in some of the notes and questions and answers parts of that particular paragraph. But one of the notes explains that synopsis and codification summarizes and synthesizes the provisions in respect of marriage. So I think it's valuable for us that we read the synopsis and codification. Dennis, it'll be on page 149 to the top of 152. Under the laws of personal status, read from 1 through what will be I, J, N, O, under O. In other words, that whole section of IV, C, A to O, pages 149 to 152. Again, while he's looking for it, it's because one of the notes says that this section summarizes and synthesizes the provisions in respect of marriage. Oh, you're muted, Dennis.
There we go. Laws of personal status. Marriage. Marriage is highly recommended, but not obligatory. Plurality of wives is forbidden. Marriage is conditioned upon both parties having attained the age of maturity, which is fixed at 15. Marriage is conditioned on the consent of both parties and their parents, whether the woman be a maiden or not. It is incumbent upon both parties to recite a specifically revealed verse indicating their being content with the will of God. Marriage to one's stepmother is forbidden. All matters related to marriage with one's kindred are to be referred to the House of Justice. Marriage with unbelievers is permitted. Betrothal. The period of engagement must not exceed 95 days. It is unlawful to become engaged to a girl before she reaches the age of maturity. The dowry. Marriage is conditioned on payment of a dowry. The dowry is fixed at 19 mikvahs of pure gold for city dwellers and 19 mikvahs of silver for village dwellers, depending on the permanent residence of the husband and not of the wife. It is forbidden to pay more than 95 mikvahs. It is preferable that a man content himself with the payment of 95 mikvahs of silver. If the full payment of dowry is not possible, the issue of a promissory note is not permissible.
Is permissible.
Is permissible. I beg your pardon. Should either party, following the recital of the specifically revealed verse and the payment of the dowry, take a dislike to the other before the marriage is consummated, the period of waiting is not necessary prior to a divorce. The taking back of the dowry, however, is not permitted. The husband must fix for his wife the time of his return when intending to travel. If for a legitimate reason he is prevented from returning at the appointed time, he must inform her and strive to return to her. If he fails to fulfill either condition, she must wait 9 months, after which she may remarry, though it is preferable for her to wait longer. If news of his death or murder reaches her, and the news is confirmed by general report or by 2 reliable witnesses, she may remarry after the lapse of 9 months. If the husband departs without informing his wife of the date of his return and is aware of the law prescribed in the Kitab-i-Aqdas, the wife may remarry after waiting a full year. If the husband is unaware of this law, the wife must wait until news of her husband reaches her. Should the husband, after the payment of the dowry, discover that the wife is not a virgin, the refund of the dowry and the expenses incurred may be demanded. If the marriage has been conditioned on virginity, the refund of the dowry and of the expenses incurred may be demanded and the marriage invalidated. To conceal the matter, however, is highly meritorious in the sight of God.
That last sentence or phrase reminds me of a situation that Mr. Nachavani spoke of in one of his talks to the World Center staff. The talk was called The Minimum and the Maximum. What is it that we can do for the faith? The minimum. And who can arise to do the maximum? Ali Nachavani used a lot of examples in that talk. One of them he related to this very law about virginity. He said, the minimum of the law of the Aqdas on the parties being virgins, the minimum is you can divorce them. That's allowed in the Aqdas. He said, but the maximum is this: to conceal the matter is highly meritorious in the sight of God. We could discuss that further, such as how that relates to the 95 days of the engagement period, when you are supposed to, the couple, determine the character and personality of the person they intend to marry. If that is done on the spiritual level, we can foresee that the finding out of one party not being a virgin may be insignificant to the happiness of their marriage. The Universal House of Justice enlarged upon the subject of virginity and other laws of the Aqdas. Please refer to a letter written to an individual believer dated 28 April 1974. I will just read these few sentences from the House of Justice message. In the case you cite, however, that of a wife who was found by her husband not to have been a virgin, the dissolution of the marriage can be determined only, quote, if the marriage has been conditional on virginity. Presumably, therefore, if the wife wishes to exercise such a right in respect to the husband, she would have to include a condition as to his virginity in the marriage contract. Of course, we know that Baha'i marriages are monogamous. So let us read, Dennis, note 89 for a bit of religious background on the subject. So under the note section, please read 89. I said that we will be reading other references to explain paragraph 64, 63, that there were items in that Kitab-i-Aqdas paragraph that we will now take apart. We'll first take it apart with note 89.
Note 89. Beware that ye take not unto yourselves more wives than two. Whoso contenteth himself with a single partner from among the maidservants of God, both he and she shall live in tranquility. While the text of the Kitab-i-Aqdas appears to permit bigamy, Baha'u'llah counsels that tranquility and contentment derive from monogamy. In another tablet, he underlies the importance of the individual acting in such a way as to bring comfort to himself and to his partner. Abdu'l-Baha, the authorized interpreter of the Baha'i writings, states that in the text of the Aqdas, monogamy is in effect enjoined. He elaborates this theme in a number of tablets, including the following. Know thou that polygamy is not permitted under the law of God, for contentment with one wife hath been clearly stipulated. Taking a second wife is made dependent upon equity and justice being upheld between the two wives. Under all conditions, however, observance of justice and equity towards two wives is utterly impossible. The fact that bigamy has been made dependent upon an impossible condition, it is clear proof of its absolute prohibition. Therefore, it is not permissible for a man to have more than one wife. Polygamy is a very ancient practice among the majority of humanity. The introduction of monogamy has been only gradually accomplished by the manifestations of God. Jesus, for example, did not prohibit polygamy, but abolished divorce except in the case of fornication. Muhammad limited the number of wives to 4, but making plurality of wives contingent on justice and reintroducing permission for divorce. Baha'u'llah, who was revealing his teachings in the milieu of a Muslim society, introduced the question of monogamy gradually in accordance with the principles of wisdom and the progressive unfoldment of his purpose. The fact that he left his followers with an infallible interpreter of his writings enabled him to outwardly permit 2 wives in the Kitab-i-Aqdas, but uphold the condition that enabled Abdu'l-Baha to elucidate later that the intention of the law was to enforce monogamy.
In paragraph 63, it talks about a man who can take into service a maid and to do so with propriety. Baha'u'llah, as it says, was living in a Muslim society, and in the Shiite religion, if a man, excuse me, if a man wanted a maid for his household, he had to go into a marriage agreement, and Baha'u'llah abolished this. So he says in the notes, a woman can work in a man's house in a job for which she will receive wages, and she has the right to marry whoever she wants. So that's explained in one of the notes, which we won't read. Marriage is not obligatory, Baha'u'llah says, but it does require celibacy. So let's read note 91.
This is my bidding unto you. Hold fast to it as an assistance to yourselves. While marriage is enjoined in the Kitab-i-Aqdas, Baha'u'llah clarifies that it is not obligatory. Shoghi Effendi, in a letter written on his behalf, also declared that marriage is by no means an obligation, and he affirmed that, in the last resort, it is for the individual to decide whether he wishes to lead a family life or live in a state of celibacy. If a person has to wait a considerable period of time before finding a spouse, or ultimately must remain single, it does not mean that the individual is thereby unable to fulfill his or her life's purpose, which is fundamentally spiritual.
We know about celibacy in religion from a Roman Catholic point of view, if nothing else, having been raised and practiced Roman Catholicism. I was certainly aware that the priest that I was attending Mass for were practicing celibacy, or should have been. It was very interesting for me then to learn that the Catholic Church had a shortage of priests, and were trying to fill that shortage by agreeing to merge with certain personnel in the Orthodox churches. You know, when Christ died, eventually, very soon, the Christianity split into different sects. And so you have different Orthodox Christian religions that allow their priests to marry. So the problem for the Catholic Church was, how do you bring in new priests who have wives and children and merge them with the Roman Catholic priest who must practice celibacy and never marry? So you can see another benefit of obeying the laws that God's latest manifestation has brought. All these man-made rules will be abrogated. So now let's read something about the dowry. He abolished a lot of the practices requiring great sums of money with dowries. And he limited the amount of the dowry that the man should give the woman. So let's read this, Dennis. Only Abdu'l-Baha's quote on page 209. City dwellers.
City dwellers must pay in gold, and village dwellers in silver. It dependeth on the financial means at the disposal of the groom. If he be poor, he payeth 1 vahid. If of modest means, he payeth 2 vahids. If well-to-do, 3 vahids. If wealthy, 4 vahids. And if very rich, he giveth 5 vahids. It is in truth a matter or agreement between the bridegroom and the bride and their parents. Whatever agreement is reached should be carried out.
After that, Abdu'l-Baha encourages further questioning of this dowry business to be referred to the Universal House of Justice. 1 vahed is equal to 19 mishkals. So for having no more than 5 mishkals means no more than 5 vaheds means no more than 95 mishkals. Now, I found some calculations from 1987. Of course, gold and silver prices are much higher now, but this is what I found. 19 mithscals is equal to 2.2 troy ounces, or approximately 69.2 grams. At the present time, March 1987, this is equivalent to about 914 US dollars. So at that time, the maximum that Baha'u'llah allows for a dowry, 95 mithqals, 5 vaheds, would be equal to, at that time, $4,570. Now, you know that this is not a law of the Aqdas that has been given to us for being obedience to. One of the cultures where the dowry is really quite a problem is in India. Some of you may know about bride burning. And it's where the husband or the husband's parents are responsible for burning or mutilating their son's bride because the bride's father, now the wife, doesn't want to send more money for the dowry. During the 80s and 90s, there were 5,800 wives who were experienced this persecution. So this idea of a dowry is very serious. It can't be completely obliterated by Baha'u'llah and keep the love and unity and understanding. But my understanding is that the dowry is meant for the wife, for the bride, in order to give her some financial sustenance as a distinct individual, rather in a culture where the woman is, shall we say, less in the eyes of society. And note that the dowry is paid by the bridegroom to the bride. The House of Justice put out a compilation in 1996. An individual wrote to the World Center, look for a 27 June 1996 letter in which there are headlines in bold on different subjects. The first subject is monogamy, sexual equality, marital equality, and the Supreme Tribunal. It's a very good thing to supplement your knowledge of the Kitab-i-Aqdas. One of the paragraphs on page 2 says that the institution of the covenant has direct bearing on the laws of the Kitab-i-Aqdas. That there should be a progressive application of Baha'i laws, which we know because we're living in that period. I'm just reading some parts of this several page message from the House of Justice. It is important to consider that Baha'u'llah was revealing his teachings in the period of the Muslim society where the practice of polygamy was entrenched. I know of one case personally where the House was asked about cultures where the man already had multiple wives. The answer was that it was unjust for him to just pick one out of his multiple wives and leave the others to fend for themselves, so that he was to continue supporting the more than one wife, but that as soon as he took another one, he was in trouble. So all these questions, Abdu'l-Baha said, should be referred to the Universal House of Justice. There's one section under marital equality where the quote is about who's the head of the family, because in some cases, the husband of the father is listed as the head of the family. And the House of Justice says in this one message, a new meaning should be sought in the light of the principle of the equality between men and women, and of the statement of the Universal House of Justice that neither husband nor wife should ever unjustly dominate the other. The last is a very popular subject for the whole World Center, no matter if it's Abdu'l-Baha or Shoghi Effendi or the House of Justice. And that is why women are not on the Universal House of Justice. You can read the answer yourself. You're probably very familiar with it. But in this equality between men and women is in this letter from the House of Justice, what is brought up is the Supreme Tribunal, which will eventually be part of the New World Order, the kingdom of God on earth. This paper ends with, and there is nothing in the text to preclude the participation of women in such future international bodies as the Supreme Tribunal. Again, that's a letter from the House of Justice. Actually, it's not even a letter. It's a memorandum from the research department to the Universal House of Justice in response to a letter of question to the House of Justice, 27 June 1996. All right. That is all we're going to cover from the Aqdas on marriage. Is there any question right now before we go on to divorce? Okay, let's go on to divorce. And just as we read a section of synopsis and codification on marriage, we're going to do the same thing on divorce. So, Dennis, would you get to pages 172 and 173 and read number 2, A through I?
Okay, all right. 172. It's page 172, is that right?
Yes, 172. Synopsis and codification. Is it there?
I was still in notes.
Yeah, you have to be in the synopsis and codification. 152.
162. Thank you.
No, 152.
52.
Yep. Number 2, read
There we
from
go.
A through I, just about a page and a quarter.
Divorce is strongly condemned. If antipathy or resentment develop on the part of either the husband or the wife, divorce is permissible only after the lapse of 1 full year. The beginning and end of the year of waiting must be testified by 2 or more witnesses. The act of divorce should be registered by the judicial officer representing the House of Justice. Intercourse during this period of waiting is forbidden, and whoever breaks this law must repent and pay the House of Justice 19 miquols of gold. A further period of waiting after divorce has taken place is not required. The wife who is to be divorced as a result of her unfaithfulness forfeits the payment of the expenses during the waiting period. Remarrying the wife whom one has divorced is permissible, provided she has not married another person. If she has, she must be divorced before her former husband can remarry her. If at any time during the waiting period affection should recur, the marriage tie is valid. If this reconciliation is followed by estrangement and divorce is again desired, a new year of waiting will have to be commenced. Should differences arise between husband and wife while traveling, he is required to send her home or entrust her to a dependable person who will escort her there, paying her journey and her full year's expenses. Should a wife insist on divorcing her husband rather than migrate to another country, the year of waiting is to be counted from the time they separate, either while he is preparing to leave or upon his departure. The Islamic law regarding remarriage with the wife whom one has previously divorced is abrogated.
In January of 1980, the House of Justice released a compilation on divorce. Why? Well, usually because the subject is sent to the World Center so often that the House of Justice considers that the worldwide Baha'i community needs to have some guidance on these particular subjects. But I would like to read just the 2 paragraphs that accompanied on a letter that compilation in 1980. This is what the House of Justice said when it sent the 1980 compilation on divorce to all the national Baha'i assemblies, which they can in turn use as they feel fit for their Baha'i community. This is what the House wrote. The Universal House of Justice has noted with increasing concern that the undisciplined attitude of present-day society towards divorce is reflected in some parts of the Baha'i world community. Our teachings on the subject are clear and in direct contrast to the loose and casual attitude of the, in quote, permissive society, unquote. And it is vital that the Baha'i community practice these teachings. In order to help the believers appreciate the need to preserve the sacred marital bond, the research department has, at the instruction of the House of Justice, prepared a compilation of text on the reprehensibility of divorce in the light of our teachings. This compilation is now ready and is being shared with all national spiritual assemblies who are left free to use the text in any manner they deem desirable. Now, there have been other compilations on divorce from the World Center since 1980. I picked up one off of internet, of course, which is November 1990. So this is 10 years later. The very first sentence, you know, when the House of Justice has a compilation from the writings, they always have the central figures in order of, shall we say, significance. So you'll always find the compilations first, giving the quotes from the pen of Baha'u'llah. Then, if needed, the Bab. Then Abdul Baha, then Shoghi Effendi, then letters written on Shoghi Effendi's behalf, and perhaps then the House of Justice. So in this 1990 compilation on divorce, which is about 8 pages long, the very first quote from Baha'u'llah is 1 sentence long. Truly, the Lord loveth unity and harmony, and abhorreth separation and divorce. And that is from the Kitab-i-Aqdas. I'll read again some of the things I've highlighted. There's a statement that appears in the World Order of Baha'u'llah from The Guardian, in which he lists the characteristics of a decadent society. One of the phrases is, the irresponsible attitude towards marriage and the subsequent rising tide of divorce. Shoghi Effendi does not feel that any believer under any circumstances whatsoever can use the cause or service to it as a reason for abandoning their marriage. Rahia Khanum used to say to us at the World Center, and she would particularly speak to the young Baha'is working at the World Center, she would say, most people go into marriages for what they can get out of it instead of what they can put into it. It's something I have never forgotten. Actually, this is all that I have to report in our time on marriage and divorce. If there are no questions, we're going to go into wills and death. And you all know that you're free to write the House of Justice on any of questions that you need clarification on statements in the Aqdas. Okay, paragraphs 109 to 132 are not all about wills and death. Actually, only about 4 of them are. The first one is paragraph 109. It is noted from previous sections that the writing of a will is obligatory. It's part of Baha'u'llah's mission of keeping the world united. We're going to read some of the other paragraphs of the Kitab-i-Aqdas, in particular 128, 129, and 130. But first, I'd like us to read, Dennis, and the rest of us will listen to it. Note 149, because it says so much about the particulars involved with burials. Could you read note 149?
The Lord hath decreed that the dead should be interred in coffins. In the Bayan, the Bab prescribed that the deceased should be interred in a coffin made of crystal or polished stone. Shoghi Effendi, in a letter written on his behalf, explained that the significance of this provision was to show respect for the human body, which was once exalted by the immortal soul of man. In brief, Baha'i law for the burial of the dead states that it is forbidden to carry the body for more than 1 hour's journey from the place of death, that the body should be wrapped in a shroud of silk or cotton, and on its finger should be placed a ring bearing the inscription, I came forth from God and return unto him, detached from all save him, holding fast to his name, the merciful, the compassionate. And that the coffin should be of crystal, stone, or hard fine wood. A specific prayer for the dead is ordained to be said before interment. As affirmed by Abdul Baha and the Guardian, this law precludes cremation of the dead. The formal prayer and the ring are meant to be used for those who have attained the age of maturity, for example, 15 years of age. With regard to the material from which the coffin is to be made, the spirit of the law is that coffins should be of as durable a material as possible. Hence, the Universal House of Justice has explained that, in addition to the materials specified in the Aqdas, there is no objection to using the hardest wood available or concrete for the casket. For the present, the Baha'is are left free to make their own choices in this matter.
So the key elements is that you have the prayer for the dead, that it and the ring are meant for believers who have reached maturity, which is 15 years and older, not carrying the body more than an hour's journey from the place of death. I know of 2 cases at the World Center where we were involved with Baha'is dying and where they were located. One of my early years, about 1969, a Persian gentleman died in Tel Aviv. And we had no place in Tel Aviv to bury this pilgrim. And we could bring him back to Haifa and the Baha'i cemetery only with a police escort in the dead of night. And one of the House of Justice members, because there was very few staff members in 1969, Ali Natshavani, being one of the 2 Persian House of Justice members, went to Tel Aviv and with the permission of the authorities had a police escort to bring the body back to Haifa within the 1 hour. There was another occasion when a pilgrim died and it was too far away. The pilgrim had remained in the Holy Land to tour different parts of Israel and was quite a distance from Haifa. In that case, Dr. David Rue, a doctor, of course, had to travel to that part of Israel, in which case he then had to find a burial place locally where the woman died. She was actually Persian also. So if you have any questions about burials, please ask the House of Justice, because those are the only fundamental ones that the believers must be obedient to from the Aqdas at this time. Okay, let's see what else we can read about this subject. Paragraph 129, Dennis.
Paragraph 129. The inscription on these rings should read, "For men, unto God belongeth all that is in the heavens and on the earth, and whatsoever is between them. And he in truth hath knowledge of all things. And for women, unto God belongeth the dominion of the heavens and the earth, and whatsoever is between them. And he in truth is potent over all things." These are the verses that were revealed aforetime. But lo, the point of the Bayan now calleth out, exclaiming, "O best beloved of the worlds, reveal thou in their stead such words as will waft the fragrance of thy gracious favors over all mankind. We have announced unto everyone that one single word from thee excelleth all that hath been sent down in the Bayan. Thou indeed hast power to do what pleaseth thee. Deprive not thy servants for the overflowing bounties of the ocean of thy mercy. Thou in truth art he whose grace is infinite. Behold, we have hearkened to his call, and now fulfill his wish. He verily is the best beloved, the answerer of prayers. If the following verse, which hath at this moment been sent down by God, be engraved upon the burial rings of both men and women, it shall be better for them. We of a certainty are the supreme ordainer. I came forth from God and return unto him, detached from all save him, holding fast to his name, the merciful, the compassionate. Thus doth the Lord single out whomsoever he desireth for a bounty from his presence. He is in very truth the God of might and power.
On one of my teaching trips to Taiwan, the Baha'i National Assembly gave me a burial ring. I don't know if you can see it. It's red and writing in gold, very, very, very tiny Arabic or Persian writing. Of course, they told me, we hope you don't have to use it right away. That was 1978 that I went on that teaching trip to Taiwan and Japan from the World Center. I have it in its little bag, and I have it in my package of my will. So when I die in Rio Rancho, New Mexico, the friends will have my Baha'i ring all ready to go with me. Okay, let's read paragraph 130, and this has to do with the wrapping of the body.
Paragraph 130. The Lord hath decreed, moreover, that the deceased should be enfolded in 5 sheets of silk or cotton. For those whose means are limited, a single sheet of either fabric will suffice. Thus hath it been ordained by him who is the all-knowing, the uninformed, the informed, beg your pardon. It is forbidden to you to transport the body of the deceased a greater distance than 1 hour's journey from the city. Rather should it be interred with radiance and serenity in a nearby place.
Mr. Fatih Azam, Hushman Fatih Azam, and his family pioneered from Iran to India. Mr. Fatih Azam was a member of the National Assembly of India who came to vote for the House of Justice in 1963 when the House was first established, and then remained there as a newly elected member of the Universal House of Justice. His wife and children were to meet him in London and they had limited means, limited financial means. Bushman couldn't go back right away to bring his family to London for the Congress because he's now a member of the House of Justice. So he's going to go directly from Haifa to London, where the House of Justice was introduced to the Baha'is of the world. Shafageh Fatih-Azam and the children had to come later. She told me this story about when she first went to India, and she had little Shahab as her only son then. They wound up having 3 sons. And she happened to arrive in India when it was one of their holiest days in the Hindu religion. The practice was to carry bodies to certain parts of India and wash it in sacred rivers and bury it in holy places. Shafageh Fatih-Azam said she was so afraid for her children that these people were walking around carrying diseased bodies, sick people walking to be in these holy places. Here's another good reason why Baha'u'llah has such unusual laws for we Westerners on burial, but the respect we pay to those believers is also a big part of the laws of Baha'u'llah. Okay. I don't seem to be saying much about the will, but what I did do is bring you a copy of my will from Haifa. I told you one time that the World Center, through its Department of External Affairs, had all the staff at the World Center fill out wills, and they provided the paper for us. And since I didn't own very much, my will at that time was only 2 pages long. This is what the Department of the House of Justice directed us to write in our wills for your information. It says, my last will and testament. First and foremost, I wish to state my full and sincere belief in the central figures of the Baha'i faith. As a Baha'i, I desire that upon my death, all Baha'i laws be followed regarding a funeral and burial. My body is not to be embalmed or cremated. There should be a funeral service conducted and a Baha'i burial no more than 1 hour's travel from the place of birth. That is the first paragraph that the World Center had each of us write, but in our own words, before we wrote the disposition of anything material we might have had to give away. What I found interesting is that the second page has my signature and my address. The first page has my signature on the side. Now, I don't remember why I had to sign every page of my will in Haifa. Perhaps because the will in Haifa had to also comply with wills for the state of Israel. So though you are obliged to make a Baha'i will, we also, wherever we are in the world, must gear it towards the laws of the country we live in. Why don't I have much to say about the will? I think because we've covered it before. Okay, so I'm on the last pages of our session, and I hope some of you have something to contribute when I've wrapped this up, because we'll still have about a half an hour together. Okay. I have here that I ran across a letter from the House of Justice. This is a session where I seem to be blessed with lots of letters from the Universal House of Justice. This one is dated 17 April 1981. And they're writing it when they're involved with one of the 7-year plans at the time. And it says a definite aspect of the plan for that particular 7 years is the development of the duties of the local spiritual assemblies. One heading in that 1981 letter is marriage, births, burials. I'm going to read just 2 small parts under that heading. They're very short. The carrying out of the Baha'i marriage laws as given to the Friends throughout the world is a vital obligation of every believer who wishes to marry. And it is an important duty of every local spiritual assembly to ensure that these laws are known and obeyed by the believers within their jurisdiction, whether or not the Baha'i marriage ceremony is recognized by civil law. The second paragraph, that was about marriage. The burial of the dead is an occasion of great solemnity and importance. And while the conduct of the funeral service and the arrangements for the interment may be left to the relatives of the deceased, the local spiritual assembly has the responsibility for educating the believers in the essential requirements of the Baha'i laws in respect of burial at present. I remember one case where one member of a couple wishing to have the local assembly apply the law of the year of patience. The person, one of the couple members, told the House of Justice, told the local spiritual assembly that unless the assembly can show him where it's forbidden, he will be dating during the year of patience. The local assembly mentioned could not find any place in the writings that said you cannot date other women or men while you're in the year of patience. What should have been the answer given by an educated local spiritual assembly? He's married. She's married. Got nothing to do with the year of patience or a possible divorce. They're a married couple. Married couples have the sanctity of this marriage, and you don't go out and date other women or men during the year of patience. See, this is what I mean about there's no end to the questions on marriage and divorce. I've shared with you one time where a member of a National Assembly said that they had so many personal questions and cases on marriage and divorce, that they set aside 1 hour after every meeting just to adjudicate on those questions or problems concerning marriages and divorces. We're going to end my part of this session by reading, Dennis, paragraph 132, which has nothing to do directly with any of the 4 subjects we've talked about.
Paragraph 132.
O peoples of the world,
O peoples of the world, give ear unto the call of him who is the Lord of names, who proclaimeth unto you from his habitation in the most great prison, verily no God is there but me, the powerful, the mighty, the all-subduing, the most exalted, the omniscient, the all-wise. In truth, there is no God but him, the omnipotent ruler of the worlds. Were it his will, he would, through but a single word proceeding from his presence, lay hold on all mankind. Beware lest ye hesitate in your acceptance of this cause, a cause before which the concourse on high and the dwellers of the cities of names have bowed down. Fear God, and be not of those who are shut out as by a veil. Burn ye away the veils with the fire of my love, and dispel ye the mists of vain imaginings by the power of this name, through which we have subdued the entire creation.
I think Baha'u'llah is reminding us that he is this hollow, sacred reed, and everything he writes in the Aqdas comes straight from the voice of God. He can lay hold on all mankind. One of my quotes that I use regularly is, if God were to replace his grace with his justice, there wouldn't be any creation left. My paraphrasing his words, of course. But he loves us so much that he gives us everything we need to eventually draw closer unto him, the purpose of all of our lives. Thank you for letting me share those paragraphs from the Kitab-i-Aqdas. Maybe some of you want to say something about what we've discussed, or you have some questions that maybe one of us can answer.
Yeah, thank you so much. I just want to reiterate, we did say that we were discussing will and deaths in this session, and that started from paragraph 109 to 132. And it's just important to just remind the friends that you can find the importance of writing a will in paragraph 109. And the most important thing, and you showed it when you showed your will, is you have to have the most great name to appear at the very top. And if you haven't written a will, and if you're shy about it, and if you're, if it just scares you, try to pray about it and really take the time to really write that will. You're doing not only yourself a justice, but your soul and also your loved ones. Okay, if there's any questions, please use the raise your hand feature or comments. Let me remove the spotlight here.
My assembly years ago had a meeting with a representative of our local funeral home. And of course, they were trying to get us to prepay for our burial. And we mentioned that that's a very good idea, but that we had this Baha'i law that you had to be buried 1 hour's distance from where you pass away. And so if we pay somebody here in Rio Rancho and we die in San Jose, California, the payment is null and void. Would you believe they had a program where you paid ahead of time and it was good no matter where you died, probably just in America, but that was pretty good. So here's a non-Baha'i institution that in a way is helping the Baha'is with their laws on death and burial.
Yeah, that is beautiful. That's very lofty.
I wish I'd have taken the program back then, because it's probably tripled now for burying me in Rio Rancho. Well, as I said in the beginning, if you're a seasoned believer, have been in the faith even a few years, you probably are familiar with these laws that we have to be obedient to. And there are still laws that are meant for when we are a more mature spiritual society. And bear in mind, these are not just for Westerners. These laws are to unite people and remove everything that disunites us from these societies and cultures. Ta-da!
Okay, friends, thank you so much for joining us. Oh, Susan, please unmute yourself.
I wanted to ask if the laws on betrothal and dowry are incumbent or applied to the Western believers. The one about 95 days of engagement and 19 mythquels of gold or silver. Are those applied to the Western believers?
Yeah, they're not for the Western believers. Fuad, you're shaking your head as if it's for the Eastern believers.
Yeah, I've heard it applied to Persian believers, like when both of the like sometimes it's even arranged marriages, but even if it's not, as if they're both Persians, then they do the dowry and they do the 95 days of engagement, but I haven't heard it applied to Western believers.
I know in the World Center, even when I was there back in the late 60s, 70s, and early 80s, the World Center operated, and many of the laws according to the Aqdas are to the Eastern culture rather than the Western. There was an engagement announced at the World Center that I was very personally happy about, and I was sharing the news with Ian Simple, and he said, no, that can't happen because the girl is not yet 15. And remember, we read where you can't even have the 95 period of engagement unless the two parties are the age of maturity, which is 15. That is not applicable to the Baha'is of the West.
Okay, thank you.
Of course, you're talking to somebody who's never been in, well, I have been engaged, never been married. Okay, we got Dennis with a question or a comment.
I first want to comment that I miss hearing Leighton read. He sounds like a nice, well-qualified disc jockey on a nighttime FM radio station. It's very, very good reading. Second, I'll mention that in Wisconsin, I can't speak about any other state, but it is required that you sign each page of your will.
Interesting.
So this may be something that other states do, but I just don't know about other states.
Yeah, well, maybe that was true of Israel and why I had to sign both pages. But I have my will here from New Mexico, and I didn't have to sign every page for that. I don't think I did.
I had to initial every page of mine.
And what
Okay.
state is that?
Yes.
North Carolina.
Yeah. Different countries have different procedures, and the reason is for two things. If the will is written by hand, it's very obvious that one person wrote the will because it's written by hand. But still, they require you to sign each page. If it's typed, then they want you to sign each page because it's typed, and nobody can type a will.
Okay,
But,
here's
yeah.
here's my
Yes,
will for you.
excellent.
And you're right. It's a typed will from a lawyer. This is a legal document.
Yes,
And on the bottom of every page, there's a little line that
yes,
I have to initial.
right.
And I just flipped through the different pages and I haven't, oops, one page is missing. I didn't initial that.
When I became Baha'i in the first 9-year plan, and I read, and we read what we read, and because we believe that whatever Baha'u'llah has said is from God, whether it was applicable or not to the West, we abide by it.
Yes.
So when we got married, when we got engaged, it didn't exceed 95 days.
Very good.
Yeah,
Because
that's beautiful.
we felt that this is from God, and whether it's applicable to the West or not, we will try to strive to live by the teachings of Baha'u'llah.
Very good.
Yes, and what we didn't cover and what you can read in those House of Justice compilations is that these are spiritual marriages that should not just be, as today's society seems to be doing, tossed away very easily. Baha'u'llah wants all of our marriages to be a spiritual contract, not just the raising of children. And if it's a spiritual relationship, it'll survive all the worlds of God. As united souls, I don't know what the marriage situation is in the next world. I'll come back and tell you.
Okay, if we don't have any more questions or comments, I guess we will see everybody next week.
Yeah, she wanted a fortune teller for one of her events, and I became Madame Mysterioso. She was so pleased that it went well that she asked to have her picture taken with Madame Mysterioso, which I didn't mind at all.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Another thing you can put on your resume.
Yes.